Welcome to the 5 top lies the IRS leads you to believe so that you can voluntarily give them the money that you don't legally have to. So these are the 5 things that you're going to want to ask any CPA or tax attorney if you're going to have them file your taxes. And if not, you can use these things to study, go online and research them a little bit more so that you can understand how tax law actually applies. Okay, so number 1, first question you're going to want to ask, the first lie the IRS tells, leads us to believe is that the quote unquote, the federal law is supposedly the land of the law of the land over the Constitution. This is completely untrue. The federal law has the parameters of the Constitution. If they try to do anything outside those parameters laid out clearly in the Constitution, then that law is illegal and unconstitutional. Therefore, it does not need to be obeyed because it is an illegal law. So first thing you want to ask your tax attorney or your CPA is, do they believe that the federal law or the Constitution is the land of the law, is the law of the land? If they say anything other than the Constitution directly, run in the other direction because they are here to serve the government and not to serve the people or yourself. The second thing you're going to want to ask is if they've ever heard, or the term, the IRS uses the term, they teach this to the CPAs and to the tax attorneys, but they don't, however, they don't explain this to you when you are filing taxes. It's a phrase, in Latin, it says, inclusio unios est exclusio alterios, which means the inclusion of one is the exclusion of the other, which means, unless you can find this in Black's Law, you can find it in the worksheet, which that you should have be getting in your email now. What that means is that in tax law, when an example of something is given as far as the parameters to which it applies, the inclusion of one sample of where it applies is directly infers that it excludes everything else. So for example, in the tax law, when it says the words including, everything after that word only applies to that law only applies to things that are in that similar line. Like for example, the term business, or the term employee, includes things like, presidents, senators, public office, government employees, right? So it restricts that word, the application of that word or that concept to people in that line of work or in that same similar frame. So if you are not directly related or working with or earning from the government, then that law does not apply to you. If your tax lawyer or CPA says they've never heard that phrase before, or they ask you, where did you learn that phrase? Stop and run in the opposite direction, because they are aware of that phrase and they know how it actually applies, but yet they still do not apply it correctly, because obviously as a CPA or a tax attorney, their business relies on the tax scheme actually being applied, misapplied the tax law so that in the tax scheme, so they can get paid for helping people organize taxes and file taxes that they don't really have to file to begin with. So if they say that they have never heard about that term, or they ask you where you've heard of it, run in the opposite direction. The third thing that I want you to ask about, and there's a reason I'm giving these in sequence, because you'll see it's important to understand these things very clearly, okay? And so the third thing that you want to ask your CPAs or tax attorney, and what the IRS doesn't tell you. Now, here's the thing that I need to make sure that I clarify. These are lies by omission, right? Which means they're not telling you directly something false, but they're either leaving out part of the truth, which is still a lie, or they're just not giving you information that is important to have in order to understand the way they communicate and what they're actually saying. So the third thing you're going to want to ask your IRS, or the third lie that IRS leads you to believe, is that the words in the tax law have the same definition as their common use law. And you can ask your CPA or your tax attorney if the IRS uses custom definitions for certain words in the tax law. And the reality is, if they say anything other than yes, run in the other direction, because there are over 50 words in the US tax law and the constitutional tax law that have custom definitions that do not mean the same as their common use definition. Like for example, If we were talking outside of tax law, the word business means, to engage in commerce, to an interchange of values, those kind of things, to bring value to the marketplace, right? That's business. But within the tax law, the term business and trade refers specifically to the function of public office, to performing the function of public office, i.e. presidents, senators, judges, etc. So you can see how that could cause confusion, right? And how if you didn't know that it had that custom definition, you could be led to believe that you are in a business, but for tax sake, you may be outside of the tax law, you might be operating in business, but you don't have, according to tax law, a business as defined by the tax law. And so therefore, those revenues are not taxable. So I'm going to give you real quick 3 key words that you're going to have, that you want to learn the custom definitions to, because once you grasp these 3 words and their definitions in their custom definition within the tax law, you'll be able to understand how the tax law has been misapplied, and it's a lie and a tax scheme that the IRS has fooled you into believing that you need to pay taxes that don't apply to you. So the first word, because it's the word that's most commonly misrepresented, is the word wages. Now, the common use definition for the word wages means obviously compensation for, doing some kind of work, any kind of work, all kind of work. But specifically in the tax law, the custom definition of the word wages is remuneration or pay, earnings that you receive specifically in exchange for performance of a public office, such as president, president, senator, judge, etc., or as a government employee, like the mailman, anybody working in a government building, their wages are taxable. The third thing is if you are an executive or an officer of a government-owned corporation like Amtrak or Fannie or Freddie Mae. And the fourth thing is if you are a business, common use term of business, that has contracts with the government, and so you get paid from the government. Those revenues, and only those revenues that you receive from the government, are taxable, right? So those are defined as wages. Only the revenue earnings from those activities are defined as wages within the tax law. Anything outside of that is not wages as defined by tax law. So that's the first word, is understanding the custom definition of the term wages. The second word that I'm going to emphasize that's important to understand is the word employee, right? Because we see on the tax forms the word employee as well as the word wages, and we think, well, an employee is someone who does work for somebody else, right? Well, yes and no. As the custom definition of the word employee, again, it is specific to someone holding public office, such as a president, governor, judges, etc., right? Those are all holding public office. Those are, or anyone who works for those entities, right? Those are employees, okay? So that's the second word. Now, I hope you're getting an understanding of just how different, right? Because if you don't understand what the words actually mean in their context, then you're going to be able to be fooled, and we don't want you to be fooled, right? We want you to be formed and educated so that you don't, become a victim of this misapplication of the tax law. And so the third word, which I kind of already defined for you earlier, which is the word business. In the tax law, the word business, the custom definition is the function of performing public office. So again, janitors, presidents, senators, governors, mayors, all these people who hold public office, those people, the performance of that public office is according to the tax law, or as defined to the tax law, is what is defined as business. So if you are not any one of those public offices, if you're not, an employee working directly in a government building, if you are not an executive on of a government-owned corporation, and you are not a business who receives revenue directly from the government, then you are not in business according and as defined by tax law. So that's the fourth thing, right? Is those custom definitions. The fifth thing is understanding what an excise tax is. So the income tax, and it's really interesting if you listen to the actual phrase federal income tax, just think about it for a second. That means that it's a tax on federal income, right? So that means that in your job, in your work, or in your, common use term business, for providing value, that's not income that comes from the federal government. Only income that is generated or earned or paid on behalf of the federal income is what is taxable. So an excise tax, which is what the federal income tax is a tax applied to the earnings of privileged activities, right? And so what is a privileged activity? A privileged activity is an activity that is not a right that you have. So for example, you as a human being have the right to earn and accumulate wealth for yourself and for your family, to generate income, right? To generate earnings based on the value you provide to someone or to the marketplace, right? Though that's a right, so that can't be taxed. The excise tax, again, is tax applied to earnings from a privileged activity. What is a privileged activity? A privileged activity is all activities that you need permission to perform, i.e., it has to do with the government. So again, only four activities really that are taxable, whose earnings or payment for these four activities are taxable, are again, holding public office, president, governors, mayors, etc., government employees, military, postal service, and anybody who works in a government building, executives of government-owned businesses, i.e., Amtrak, Freddie and Fannie Mae, things along those lines, FDIC. And fourth, actual businesses who have contracts with the government and so receive payment directly from the government in exchange for products or services. If you're not involved in any one of those four activities, then your revenue, your earnings, your income is not defined as wages according to the tax law, which means you do not need to pay taxes on those earnings. So again, this has been a quick video on the 5 top lies that IRS leads you to believe so that you can voluntarily give up your money. That's not a requirement. So if you thought this was helpful, check out, I've got the personal tax relief program that you can purchase below. It's $49. You can get this. This is going to give you everything you need to make sure that you are filing correctly this year, so you can get back all of your money that was taken out this year from your taxes. And it's also going to give you everything you need to make sure you file correctly from here on out to the future years, so that you can get back every single cent that was taken out of your pay for quote unquote income tax or Medicare or Social Security. You can get all of that money back. And not only that, it's actually also going to show you how you can set yourself free from falling victim to this tax scheme and the misapplication of the tax law. So go ahead, get that course now, so that before you file your taxes, you can file correctly and you can start getting all of your money back from this year on forward. I'll see you in the next video.